Hey, what's up? Hello everyone, welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
My name is Dyl, and today we have our May Oscar predictions. If you're watching this right when they come out, you may look at the date and say, it's still April, but you know what? We're taking some liberty here. Most of these are coming out in May. It's not way too early anymore. This is the perfect time for Oscar predictions because we just got our first film festival lineup for this season, as well as a lot of trailers are coming out for some of these movies, and release dates are being updated, run times are being updated. We're learning a lot more. With that being said, though, we are restarting all these, and we're starting with the big boys. Best Picture. Matt, take it away.
So much has changed in the race in so little time, and things will continue to change. But here we are, and I'm ready to give you guys my updated lineup for Best Picture, and all the things that are possible. What could win? What do I think will win? What are the pros and cons that everything is facing? As we get deeper into the year, I'm going to maintain the same criteria for my Best Picture lineup, even that I will at the end of the year. So I'm going to look at a few stats. One stat is that half of my lineup has to be from directors who have never been nominated before, which means 5 out of 10 of these will be from established directors, and 5 out of 10 will be from fresher directors, people who haven't had a film in Best Picture in the past. The risky thing about this is we don't really know which of the fresh faces are going to work out, which of them are going to be Olivia Wilde. Last year with Don't Worry Darling, which was an early prediction I made that did not pan out. So it's very possible some of these will flop, but I have a good feeling about a lot of these. Another thing, when we're looking at what could win Best Picture, we have to be thinking what could win Best Screenplay and Best Director. Those are the two biggest criteria when it comes to Best Picture. You need that screenplay win or a director win, and that's what can propel you into the top slot. And it has to feel good to vote for. There needs to be a narrative of positivity. The film doesn't have to be feel good, but you have to want to support the cast, support the crew, support the filmmakers. That has been the golden ticket in these past few years, from Parasite to Nomadland, even to Coda, and then to last year, Everything Ever All at Once. You need to feel good voting for it. So with that said, what is my pick to win Best Picture? We did a video in January where we talked about the coming year, and at that time I said that The Color Purple was my number one for Best Picture. That has not changed. The Color Purple is still my number one in Best Picture. It was my prediction then. It's still my prediction. For a moment, I switched to Past Lives, and then I switched back. The pros on this movie: it's win competitive in director. This is going to be a tech juggernaut. It's going to have great performances. And we know that this director, this is one of Blitz Bazawule's first films. He's done a few, but I'm not very familiar with them. But he works so much in music videos with Beyonce. He's going to bring visual flair. He's going to bring something really interesting visually to this story. The cast is going to be extremely easy to root for. It's going to have a great feel-good factor, just in the sense that people are going to want to see this cast shine. They're going to want to see this cast get up on stage. It's a SAG Ensemble contender. There's a good narrative around it. It's going to feel good to vote for this movie. Let's look at the cons, though. It's not win competitive in screenplay because it's a musical. That's one big thing. There's no chance this wins adapted. I shouldn't say no chance. There's like a 5% chance this wins adapted. Also, the director is very unproven outside of those music videos. I mentioned that as a big positive, but at the same time, it's possible that Blitz Bazawule kind of drops the ball on the movie. I don't think he will, but it's possible. Also, Warner Brothers is distributing this. Their slate is so busy, and a late release date at Christmas makes it very hard to run up support, as we've seen in these past few years. So that makes me worried. I want to see this get a TIFF or Telluride premiere, and if it gets that TIFF Telluride premiere, I'm not locking in Best Picture for it, but I feel really good about Best Picture. If they just drop it on Christmas, I am worried.
Those are all great points, especially the building up the hype, because as we've seen the last few years, you can even include Parasite and Nomadland in that as well, because they did have their premieres way before their initial release later in the season. Is that these movies need to be seen early, because yes, that gives them time to die down a little bit, but also gives them time to come back into the discussion. So I agree with you there. If Color Purple gets a TIFF, which would be the one I would lean a little bit more towards in terms of positivity, but also Telluride, as you mentioned, premiere, that would be great. The other big negative you mentioned as well, Warner Brothers, we don't really know how they're going to do this with 4 movies. All 4 obviously aren't going to hit, but no one seems to agree, hey, what are the 2 or what are the 3 they're actually going to push? We both lean more Color Purple as their number 1, Dune as their number 2, but I've seen people say Dune's number 1, Barbie's number 2. I guess we have to see what they end up doing.
We're not used to seeing a distributor with so many strong films all releasing at once. I have a lot of faith in the Color Purple. Like I said, SAG Ensemble winner looks to be in the cards. We know this is going to be powerful. It's got the Spielberg factor behind it. I also think it's win competitive in like 4 or 5 categories. I was looking at winning packages for films, and I think the winning package for the Color Purple would be director, actress, cinematography, and then picture. 4 wins. And it could take song as well. So that could be that possible 5 Oscar package or 4 Oscar package right there. All right, now I did my predictions last night. I filled them out. At number 2, I did have the holdovers. And then I realized, as I went through all my predictions, I realized that I had one film outperforming everything. And then I switched things around. So Holdovers is not my number 2 anymore. I realized that I had The Zone of Interest winning 4 Oscars and getting nominated for 8. And that, to me, feels like a number 2. So I'm going to move things around and say The Zone of Interest is my new number 2. This might feel like this is very out there to predict, because why the hell are you picking this movie for number 2, right? People are going to be saying that, but hear me out, okay? This has the perfect art house mainstream package. It has a director that appeals to critics and very highbrow industry members, highbrow audiences, but the subject is Academy friendly. This, in my eyes, is a winning package for nominations in the modern era. I think Oscar bait is dead. You can't just make a basic ass film and get Oscar nominations. Elevated Oscar bait is the new wave. And when I say elevated Oscar bait, I mean you take the story of something that would have been Oscar bait in the past, and then you give a bit of an elevated approach to it. I think the ultimate example of this is The Favorite a few years ago. The Favorite being this film from a director who had previously made The Lobster and The Killing of a Sacred Deer. You take that weirdo director who makes these absurd comedies and you give him subject matter that could have been done by someone like Stephen Frears, who made Philomena, which is very classic Oscar bait. And when you give this kind of criticky director this Oscar bait story, they do something really interesting with it, but it still appeals to those Oscar bait voters, the ones that like that type of thing. And so with The Zone of Interest, what I see is you have a director like Jonathan Glazer who's super, super interesting, and you give him a Holocaust movie that's going to be a fresh take from everything I've heard. This feels like something that could be undeniable. We'll know in about a month's time at Cannes. This could become A24's main push over Past Lives. It looks like a strong contender in the international category. That's one win right there. It could be win competitive and adapted. I don't know what's going to win adapted right now, so I'm just putting that there. It looks like the ceiling for this is All Quiet on the Western Front meets Triangle of Sadness at the Oscars, and that feels really strong. That said, cons. We already know that A24 has another great film. Even last year, they did not get 2 films into Best Picture. Are they really going to get both Past Lives and Zone of Interest? Which one do I feel more confident in? The one that we know has great reviews, or the one that is still a question mark? If this doesn't win the Palme or Best Director at Cannes, I am not going to put this at number 2 for the Oscars. I'm just not. It could also be very controversial. They shot this movie in Auschwitz. If that's not done extremely respectfully, there's going to be controversy about this and people are going to be upset. Also, Jonathan Glazer, he did make Under the Skin. I keep saying, don't think about Under the Skin. This is going to be different. But if it's not different, if it's not elevated Oscar bait and just full-on art house, that is a killer for this at the Oscars.
Last time we had our Best Picture, we didn't even know about. It wasn't on our radar at all. And now it's up to your number 2. It's in my 10 as well, just on the lower side. But I like all the points you make there. I do think this has a great potential package. It's just how many of those does it actually hit on? I'm a little bit more conservative at the moment, having it performing more like Triangle, I guess, than All Quiet, getting more of like a 3 or 4 type nominations than an 8. But I can easily see it all the way up there. What do you have at number 3?
At number 3, I have The Holdovers. This was my number 2. The way that I feel about this is it's a fall fest breakout, like Banshees of Inisherin. It's going to be a critical darling, a comedy that appeals to highbrow voters and middlebrow voters. It's going to have great performances, and I think it's win competitive in original screenplay. It is currently my pick for original screenplay. The cons. Alexander Payne controversy is brewing. It is very possible it gets ignored. It's also possible that we hit the end of the year and this is another Amsterdam. The other thing, it doesn't seem too different from other Alexander Payne movies, which means it might not feel good to vote for. So I don't think this is really win competitive in picture. It's also a small ensemble and might be too downbeat to win like Banshees was. At number 4, I've got May, December. Pros. We've read the script. We know that this is good. It's very strong and it could win original screenplay. We also know Todd Haynes is overdue. It's also, I would say, win competitive in 3 acting categories. Not just win competitive in screenplay, but also for Julianne Moore, for Natalie Portman, and for Charles Melton, who I actually do think will win Best Supporting Actor. The Cannes premiere also gives it plenty of time for steam to build up. The Cannes premiere also makes me worried this type of film feels like a Venice movie, and that is a little bit worrying for me. It also may be a bit too controversial, maybe a bit too subtle. It does not spoon feed the audience at all, and that big elephant in the room still got no distributor, but we are gonna know, is this movie good in about a month's time. All right. Next up, number 5, I have Killers of the Flower Moon. Number 5, you're going to be saying, number 5, this is way too low. This is Martin Scorsese's movie. Put this at number 1. But you see, this is why this is number 5. It's because it's Martin Scorsese's new movie. There's no chance this is going to win. It is sure to be nominated. Actually, can we even say it's sure to be nominated after Babylon happened last year, where we all said, this is a lock to get nominated? This is pretty sure to get nominated, barring some huge random occurrence that this movie just underperforms. It also has the potential for an insane package on nominations morning. This could be the nominations leader, or it could be second for nominations. The hype around it is insane, and it's potentially win competitive in Best Director for Scorsese and Best Adapted Screenplay. But the cons. This is the early frontrunner that flops with wins. It just is. It's been a trend that's been happening year after year. And at 3.5 hours, I just can't see the Academy voting for this. It's going to be a very cold, very slow, very meditative crime drama that is 3.5 hours long. I don't see that feeling good for people to vote for. I don't see that being something that's going to connect with general audiences that much. Scorsese's odds are totally stacked against him. He would need to make the undeniable best film of his career in order to win, which I don't think that he will make the best film of his career because he has such a legendary career. It would be extremely hard. I'm going to say 100% this does not win. The other thing, it's going to be a massive financial flop. The budget of this film is $200 million before marketing. After marketing, that's going to be $400 million minimum. This is going to need to break like $500 million to make a profit. And it is a streaming film. It's gonna have flop baggage the way that Fabelmans did.
See, I think this movie could avoid the flop baggage because it is a streamer movie. It's not expected to make money, but I get that angle.
But
I
they're
think for
giving
people,
it a full theatrical run. That's the difference, is they're gonna be reporting numbers. Netflix doesn't report their theatrical numbers. Apple has been very clear they want this to do theaters, right? So I get the people that are putting Killers at number 1 and saying this is just my filler spot because I know it's getting nominated and I'll put something else at number 1 later. I get it. I completely get that. Like, I think that's what the Oscar expert said in his video, and I saw that and went, yeah, I get it. Like, I totally get that. It's safe to put there for now. That said, that's why we get stuff like The Fabelmans. That's why we get stuff like The Irishman or Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or Dunkirk, where it's an early frontrunner that just does not perform on the Oscar night. Next up, number 6, Past Lives. Pros, we already know this is great from the reviews. It feels like it fits the Moonlight Coda Everything Ever All at Once package of the indie darling that'll make it to the end of the year. It is certain to be a top 3 critic film at the end of the year. This is going to be sweeping critic awards by the end of the year. It is win competitive in screenplay, maybe in director, and there is tons of time for steam to build with it releasing in June. But the cons here: A24 may push something else, like I just said, Zone of Interest. It's also not competitive at SAG at all. As well, there are concerns that this could be the farewell, that it could be forgotten. There's also many comments about the first 2/3 of the movie not being as excellent as the final third, and that makes me very nervous, because if you have to get to the end to love the film the way that a lot of people are loving the film, are voters going to give it that time, give it that energy, give it that chance?
It's really going to come down to just what A24 does, because if a Zone of Interest is too controversial, it doesn't connect with a lot of people, Past Lives, put it in high. Can they get 2 in? I know you can make the case last year Whale wasn't very beloved, it was very controversial. Zone of Interest could also be that type of movie this year. I still have faith in Past Lives at the moment. I've not seen the movie, but just from the initial reactions and a lot of those ones that you just mentioned there, like, oh, he don't really love it until like the third act, blah blah blah, have been coming in the more recent times where it's like, okay, the movie's been out, it's unanimous praise, but when somebody has unanimous praise, people have to, like, knock it down, be like, whoa, it's not that good, And
that's the other danger coming out that early, is it gives time for that criticism to really build too. But number 7, Dune Part 2. Pros, it's sure to get a ton of nominations. I counted last night what I have for it. I think I have it getting 6 nominations and 4 wins. It's not the same 6 wins that the first one got, but it's going to get a lot of those nominations. It's going to do extremely well with the techs once again. But the cons here: Dune is not Lord of the Rings in terms of impact. And Lord of the Rings already happened. They're not going to do another Lord of the Rings where every film in a series gets all of the nominations and then gets lauded at the very end. Also, this might not be the end. This is not Return of the King. This is part 2 in a potential 3-part series. I don't think this is win competitive in screenplay or director, which means it's solidly at my number 7 spot. It is in for Best Picture, but is it going to win? No, it's not. Number 8, I have Air. This is out already. We have seen this. It has strong reviews and buzz. Amazon wants to push this. They've said that they want Oscars for this. They are going for it. It feels like an Oscar movie, and it has the profile that not many other movies have, that we always kind of need a movie. We always need dad movies. This is the traditional Oscar bait movie. I said Oscar bait is dead, but there always is 1 or 2 that slip in. They're not going to win, but they're going to slip in for a nomination, and this feels like it has that profile. But the cons here: this nomination ceiling for this is extremely low. There are only 4 nominations that this movie can get, and that is troublesome. And this movie can be forgotten in a few months. Let's say Amazon has another hit with Saltburn. Are they going to drop Air fully? Very possible. And it has 0 chance of a win in any category, which makes me feel a bit nervous. That's why it's my number 8 right now. At number 9, Poor Things. I swapped out, I had Strangers for so long as my Searchlight film, but I'm putting Poor Things in here because Missing Can gives me faith that this is going to go to the Venice Film Festival. And if this goes to the Venice Film Festival, then it could be Banshees. Like I said last year, the big thing that we messed up with is that we looked at Searchlight's films and we went, oh, Empire of Light's their push, even though Banshees is at Venice. Empire of Light has to be their push. If Poor Things is the one that's at Venice, that means good things. Also, win competitive in adapted screenplay, possibly in actress as well. This is another film, like I said with Zone of Interest, this is elevated Oscar bait. It's set in Victorian Scotland, it's a medical drama, but it's also a comedy, and it's also Frankenstein. I've started reading the book a little bit. It's kind of exciting, but the cons here, it's possibly offensively weird. It makes me feel, like I've said in the past, like Babylon. Maybe this is going to shock people more than it entertains them. And I'm still not convinced that Lanthimos has any interest in ever making an Oscar movie ever again. So, I don't know. That's why I've got it number 9, while some people might have it very much higher. And at number 10, I am very nervous about this one. I need a Netflix film in here, so I'm sticking with my 10 as El Conde. What else is Netflix pushing? Maestro? Rustin? Eh. This is a comedy from a renowned director. It's sure to be probably Netflix's highest critical praised movie of the fall festival circuit. But that said, it has a very low nomination ceiling. And there are other international films out there, even in my top 10. I already have the Zone of Interest. Am I really going to put a second international film in? For the moment, I guess. And also, maybe Netflix just gets their obvious one in. Maybe Maestro is better than we've heard. Pablo Larraín, he doesn't care about awards, right? If his Princess Diana movie and his Jackie Kennedy movie couldn't make a picture, why would he get in for a vampire movie about Pinochet? Why would he get in for that? I don't know. I've got it number 10 for now because I need a Netflix movie in there.
I think for those last two movies you talked about, of El Conde and Poor Things, it's not that the directors are have tried or going to try to make an Oscar movie. It just so happens they make a movie that the Oscars like, yeah, I'll take that. Like, I don't think The Favorite was made for awards. It just so happened to get a lot. And as we saw, Jackie and Spencer definitely weren't made for awards. They just happened to get a few on the way. So maybe this one connects more voters with it having Netflix's push behind it, which is probably a stronger push than maybe he's had in the past. But also, Netflix showed last year, they sometimes don't really know where to focus. And sometimes that can be to the detriment of some films, but to the positive to some other films.
So that's my top 10. I'm going to slam through the rest of my list so that you guys have all the perspective on it, and I'm not going to take too much time on anything, but there's a big obvious one outside of my top 10 that you're going to say, hey, wait a minute, why is that not in there? And that's number 11, Oppenheimer. Now, Oppenheimer probably would have been my 10 over El Conde if I wasn't sticking to two things, which is I need studios in there, which means Netflix takes precedent over Universal. Universal doesn't need a film in Best Picture, so that's one part. And the other thing is that I told you at the beginning of the video, I have my quota of 5 new directors who haven't been nominated and 5 directors who have, which means Christopher Nolan is edged out there. But at number 11, I do have Oppenheimer. Pros: this could be one of the biggest movies of the year. It looks closer to Dunkirk than Tenet. Universal is going to want this to get into Best Picture. They are going to push it. It's also win competitive in sound and editing. But the cons here, Nolan's strength has never been writing. Are we really thinking that a straight biopic that has no sci-fi elements, that is just like a full-on drama, it doesn't feel like it's in his wheelhouse? We haven't seen him do stuff like this in the past. It could end up being that movie that people really like, but it gets like 3 or 4 nominations at the end of the year and doesn't win anything. Number 12, Strangers. This is a Searchlight movie directed by Andrew Haig. Pros here: if Poor Things is not Searchlight's push, this is. Haig is in a prime spot for a nomination. He has directed actors 2 nominations before, but he's never been in himself. Cons: it may be too quiet, maybe too intellectual and criticky. This needs a Venice spot. Number 13, La Chimera. Pros: Neon is extremely strong with the Cannes to Oscar pipeline. But the cons: Alice Rohrwacher is not an Oscar-y director. She really just has... When I say elevated Oscar bait, I don't even think she'd make that, because her films are just kind of grimy in a way, and they don't really feel like they'd connect with the Oscars. Also, the plot of this doesn't really sound like an Oscar plot, but I have it here because of Neon, and, you know, maybe this wins the Palme d'Or, or Best Director, or some big prize it can, and makes its way over to the Oscars. Number 14, Barbie. I can feel people yelling at me through the screen, Barbie should be higher! Look, this is one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and the pros here, this is most people's most anticipated movie of the year. It has insane buzz. It's going to be win competitive in multiple categories, including costumes, makeup, and production design. But the cons: no matter how good this movie is, a huge chunk of the Academy will just flat out refuse to watch it. Dylan, you were saying that you saw a movie recently where the trailer for Barbie played and a bunch of dads started like groaning and talking to each other about like, oh, well, we're definitely not going to go see that movie. Like, yeah, that's the vibe. It was at Mario. Yeah, it was at Mario.
So the Mario crowd, they don't want Barbie. But you know who does want Barbie? You and I.
People in the Oscar community are getting maybe a bit too biased about Barbie and not thinking about how general audiences will react. And not just general audiences, because general audiences will go see Barbie. It will do well. It will make money. It will be popular. But Are the voters who voted for All Quiet or Top Gun even going to watch this movie? It has an uphill battle to be taken seriously. Honestly, I did my predictions yesterday, and I only have this getting 2 nominations for production design and for costume design. But I think it's going to win costume design, so that's one thing it's got going for it. Okay, number 15, Maestro. Pros. This is what Netflix wants nominated, but on the other hand, they wanted Bardo nominated last year, so them wanting something nominated doesn't mean it will end up being their push at the end of the year. It's also win competitive in actor and makeup. We've heard from people from test screenings that this is very dry, very boring, but it is doing reshoots, so maybe. Also, there's the sophomore slump curse, right? We saw this with Florian Zeller last year. It's very hard to make an excellent debut film that makes it into Best Picture and then follow it up with another film that makes it into Best Picture. I don't know if I believe Bradley Cooper can do it. Number 16, Naiad. This one, people are going to say this is way too high. But look, okay, pros here. It's got a great story. It's going to be inspiring. This is the classic Oscar bait example of this year for sure. It's also going to appeal to the Academy demographic because it's about someone in their 60s doing this crazy athletic feat. It's also got exciting directors. These are documentary directors who make sports docs like Free Solo. They're Oscar winners. It's got a good team. Claudio Miranda is shooting this movie, so you know it's going to look beautiful. Also, Annette Bening is overdue. This could be Netflix's sneaky push. Watch out if this is at Telluride and TIFF. This could even go on to win the TIFF People's Choice Award. That said, the cons here, there is no buzz yet for this movie. I haven't heard anything from test screenings. I haven't heard anyone talking about this. So it's possible this is just a movie no one cares about at the end of the year. It's also possible this becomes a sleeper hit that does extremely well on the festival circuit, wins the People's Choice Award, and makes it into picture. And Annette Bening could win Best Actress. Number 17, Saltburn. Pros. Buzz through the roof. Early screenings are saying this is excellent. But the cons, Amazon has Air already. They are not very good campaigners. If they want Air in, they could drop Saltburn. And also, there's the sophomore slump in effect here. I just talked about it with Maestro, but even if it's good, it doesn't mean that it needs to get Oscar nominations. Think If Beale Street Could Talk, which was a sophomore effort for Barry Jenkins, which was a great film that just mysteriously got left out all over the place. Number 18 and 19 I'll do together, because number 18 is How Do You Live, and number 19 is Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Pros here, these could both be some of the most acclaimed movies of the year, but cons, if Del Toro couldn't break out of the animated category and get any other nominations, can anyone do it? That's the biggest question for these two. Number 20, Wonka. Pros here, Paul King. He did Paddington. He is ripe to be nominated in a few categories. This is going to be a hit with general audiences. But the cons, Warner Brothers has 3 other movies higher on this list. Number 21, Rustin. Pros, Coleman Domingo is apparently fantastic in this movie, but cons, there are weak test screenings for this movie. It won't have critical support, so it needs audience support. And if the test screenings are weak, it won't have audience support, which means this is DOA. Coleman Domingo is the only nomination shot that I think this has, and even then, I'm not 100% on that. Number 22, Next Goal Wins. Pros, great release date in November. That's showing me some confidence. But cons, why so many pushes? That's showing me a lot of unconfidence. So if this doesn't win People's Choice Award or place top 3 People's Choice Award, this is the greatest beer run ever, and it goes nowhere.
For Best Director now, I am very, 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 very confused what to do here, because there's stuff I want to reach for, but also I have no real inclination to reach for stuff. And I know that you can't really have all previous nominees, but you can have all new nominees. So I try to have, a little mix of both. I have a 3-2 split right now. So at number 1, I do still have Past Lives winning picture. And for it to win picture, you need to win either director or screenplay or both. And I have that at least here for Best Director for the moment for Celine's Song. I don't really have much to say pro or against this. Just, if you have that picture at number 1, it probably should be here as well. But there's a lot of great competitors. Scorsese feels very safe to me at number 2 for Killers of the Flower Moon. Do I think he's winning? Most likely not, unless this happens to be his best movie in 20 years, even better than The Departed. I just don't think that's going to happen, even if I do think the movie's going to be amazing. I just don't see the narrative for him to win here. Apple's going to push this very hard. He is going to be that Spielberg slot where, hey, he's always one or two, but is he really one? Some people will say he's one, but he's not actually ever going to be number one. Then that's where it brings me to my biggest question marks. I am a believer in Oppenheimer. I do believe that Universal will propel this into picture. And with it being in picture, I feel like Nolan has to come along and director. I feel like this will be a thing where it has to be a picture, it has to be a director, it has to have a lead actor. They all come together, or maybe none of them happen. And at the moment, I have all three of them. I do have this missing out in screenplay, but I do have it in for director. So, Matt, at least those top three, what are your initial thoughts there?
It makes sense if you're predicting Oppenheimer in Best Picture, director makes sense. If you're predicting Past Lives to win Best Picture, it makes sense to have Celine Song at number one. That's why I have Blitz Bazawule for The Color Purple at number one, personally. So this all makes sense. I don't have Christopher Nolan in because I don't have Oppenheimer in my top 10.
That's what brings me to number four. Kind of a dumb pick, but one I'm going to stay with until proven wrong. Yorgos Lanthimos, Poor Things. I am banking on that this is Searchlight's push. Searchlight has proven year after year, if you're its number one push, you're getting in a picture, you're getting a screenplay, you're getting into director, and that's going to continue here. With Lanthimos, yes, he's not making Academy-friendly movies, they just happen to like them, at least with The Favorite, and I think that will carry over here, especially if it does get the Venice slot and gets rave critical and audience reviews, which I can definitely see happening. Number five is where I'm going with my international slot. There was a few names here I was bouncing between. I had Roar Walker for La Chimère the last few weeks, but I'm dropping that off and I'm following your lead of Jonathan Glazer for The Zone of Interest. The point that you made in our previous video about the Cannes Film Festival, this has across the board potential and specifically for Best Director and a good case to win the Palme d'Or. The other one though is Pablo Larraín for El Conde. If this is Netflix's big push, maybe, but even we saw that with last year, Edward Berger couldn't get in for All Quiet on the Western Front. So that ended up being the number 2 overall movie, and Netflix still can propel it to a Best Director. So I'm going to leave Larraín out. He's number like 7 or 8, but I want to group all three of the international directors together, because at number 6, I do have Villeneuve missing again for Dune Part 2. I feel like him and Nolan maybe could flip-flop, especially if Part 2 is better than Part 1, but we don't know if it's better than Part 1 at the moment, because a lot of people have mentioned countless times, Part 2 is very hard to adapt and it's going to be a lot bigger in scale. And while I don't doubt Villeneuve, there is, room for failure there and room for maybe it doesn't get the best reaction. Something kind of like a Blade Runner 2049, where a lot of people do admire it, but they're not rushing out to nominate it across the board. At number 8 is where I have Blitz for The Color Purple. I think if this movie, propels itself bigger to be Warner Brothers' main push, I'll move it up, but I'm a little nervous to put this up higher just because I'm not sure what the overall reaction will be to this movie. I'm surprised it's not a little bit more popular at this moment than it seems to be online. It doesn't seem like there's many people discussing or talking about this movie. That probably will change once a trailer comes out, but I just feel like the buzz for Color Purple is a lot lower than it should be. Like Wicked has insane buzz going on right now, and that movie's still 2 years out. I know like set photos are coming out and stuff right now for the moment for that, but you would feel like Color Purple would have had its moment when it had some photos come out, but hasn't really had that. Then Todd Haynes rounds out my list of 10 I want to mention here with May December. I'm a little bit lower on this movie than Matt is. I'm a little scared that it still doesn't have a distributor, but the fact that it made the in-competition lineup for Cannes, propels me back up to believe in this movie. Once it gets a distributor, depending on who it is, he may jump up into my 5 for director and knock out Lanthimos. But until then, I'm still going to have him on the outside looking in. This seems like a movie that could play a lot like Tar last year, where it's very strong in a few categories, and then it may surprise on nomination morning just because the audience who loves this movie just loves it so much.
Yeah, I really like your lineup at the moment, but I obviously have a very different lineup, but they both make sense for the way that we're both predicting Best Picture.
And if you want to get really crazy and you are predicting Warner Brothers to have a little bit of a shakeup for their releases priority, I could see a world where Greta Gerwig does get in for Barbie, but that would have to be a world where Dune gets pushed and Color Purple does not perform well, and Barbie becomes the main push because it's so captivating, it's dominating the conversation, similar to what Everything Everywhere did last year.
So let's talk adapted screenplay. At number 1, I've already told you I have Zone of Interest at number 1 right there. This just feels like it is very strong in this category. It's going to be probably very emotional. It's elevated Oscar bait, like I said. It's a storyline that is going to appeal to those Oscar bait voters with a perspective that's going to be very fresh, very interesting. This movie is looking at what it is to be a bystander while atrocities are being committed right outside of your door. That's fascinating. I think that this could have such an interesting perspective that this just ends up sweeping. But at number 2, I have Killers of the Flower Moon. This is one that I think is certain to get a nomination. May not get a win, but I think I would say it is win competitive in the same way that, like, The Irishman was win competitive for a while. Maybe by the end of the season it won't be win competitive, but for now, sure, I'll give it to it. I've read the script for this one. I was not impressed at all, but it seemed to be an earlier draft. It seems like a lot has changed since then. Number 3, I have Poor Things. Yorgos Lanthimos. I think this is being written by the same writer that did The Favorite. And as we've said on the show, I'm reading the book. Dylan is reading the book. So far, it seems like this could be an adapted screenplay thing. It seems very fun, very quirky, very different, very unique. Number 4, The Color Purple. I wish I could put it higher, but I can't, as it is a musical, and musicals don't typically do well in this category if they get nominated at all. In fact, if I didn't have The Color Purple winning Best Picture, I don't think I'd have this in my top 5, because if West Side Story couldn't get nominated for Tony Kushner completely rewriting everything about the bones of a classic musical, I don't know. Number 5, I have Strangers. Andrew Haigh. This is going to be a quiet, beautiful film. It's going to be emotional, impactful, and it's going to be heavily reliant on a great screenplay. This, I think, is going to be a major critics push, and this is what I would say would be my lone screenplay nomination, as we see so many years, as we saw last year with Glass Onion. I think actually 2021 is the only year in like 20 years where we haven't had one movie that's only gotten a screenplay nomination and nothing else. And this year, I think it's Strangers, unless Strangers becomes the big push, and then I'll put Saltburn in original. Number 6, Barbie. I know people are going to be yelling at me again. Why is this not there? I've already told you. I'm not going to go more into it. I can't wait for this movie. I feel like every time I talk negatively about Barbie's Oscar chances, I have to say, I can't wait for this movie. I'm sure this is going to be one of my favorite movies of the year. I'm just worried about what old white dudes in the Academy are going to think about this movie if they even watch it. So, that's moving on. 7, Oppenheimer. Christopher Nolan's strength is not screenplays, so I don't know. Number 8, Dune Part 2. I know that the first one got nominated, but the second one is going to have less going for it in the sense that, for one thing, the first one got in based on how much world building they had to do. They had to prove that they could set up this world and immerse you into the story immediately. That's already done here. Also, there's a lot more battle sequences in this one. They go to war. That makes me feel less like this is a screenplay movie than the first one. Number 9, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. This screenplay is going to be fantastic, but it is a Spider-Man movie, and it is animated, and that is always a struggle with non-Pixar movies to get into screenplay. And number 10, Dumb Money. Bad reactions, but theoretically this should be a very fun screenplay. Now, that said, it is a first screenplay written by 2 first-time writers, which is a little bit worrisome. But that said, it could be really fun. It could get in. Other things to mention before we move on: Guardians of the Galaxy number 3, How Do You Live?, Next Goal Wins, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and Nyad. I'm not predicting any of those, but they're all on my periphery. They all could happen, or they could drop off fully.
For Dune Part 2, though, I would defend it a little bit, saying that I think the main reason the first one got in was the ability to adapt a unadaptable book to the screen. And with how people talk about Part 2, of it being even more insane, if they're able to accurately and positively and to well reactions adapt that to the screen, that could be a narrative to get it into number 5. But also, back when the first one got nominated, that was a pretty weak year for depth in adapted screenplay. Like, the nominees were strong overall, just when you go to like number 6, 7, 8, it was a little weaker, while this year looks pretty deep for the category. So maybe there's just too much here for it to get in.
But I don't think it has the unadaptable narrative anymore around it, because the first one proved this is adaptable. Right? And that's why the first one got in. They adapted what people said, oh, it can't be done. Now we know it can be done, so why would they do it again? And also, again, the first one, the unadaptable part was that they had to build this world, and they had to do it in a way that was concise and made sense in that runtime. They've already done that groundwork, and they're building on the foundation of that now. So, and again, the second part, it has more battle scenes. It has more action than the first part. The first part had so much world building, and that's why I think that they proved they could adapt the unadaptable, because of the world building.
So moving over to the other side of screenplay, original, I'm up, and if I had this movie winning picture, and I have it winning director, screenplay, yeah, Past Lives, number 1. This is, to me, kind of the safe option, kind of like what people are doing with Killers. Just for me, I'm picking another movie for my safe option. So who knows, maybe more stuff comes out, and I move from Past Lives. Number 2, I have May, December. This seems like very much a writing movie, even if it may struggle in picture, struggle in director. The screenplay feels pretty safe to come along, as well as lead actress. Holdovers is at number 3, where if you rewind the video a little bit, Matt mentioned this during his rundown of his Best Picture lineup with this movie. There is some controversy here, but also, will it be controversy that it is addressed is my biggest question. I don't think this is win competitive, but if the controversy does not derail the campaign here, I feel like this is one that's pretty safe for a nomination all season long. It's just not going to be winning at the major precursors, but it could fare pretty well in the guilds. Then at number 4 is where we get Air. This is just basically here because we've seen this. We know this is good, and I feel like, let alone any other nomination for this movie, actor, supporting actress, editing, picture, Air in screenplay seems good, seems safe. Yes, we're in April, but original screenplay looks kind of weak this year, at least for depth. So who really knows? But also, this, when you have weaker years, that means some random stuff could just pop up. So before I say my random one that I have pop up into the top 5, what do you feel about this top 4?
I think this top 4 is unshakable. This is just the right top 4. The order that you put it in, you could shake that up any which way. Like, personally, I have the Holdovers at number 1, May, December number 2, Air number 3, and Past Lives number 4. So it's completely different in order, but this should be your top 4. This is the strongest top 4. And again, some of the ones below it, the reactions are kind of all over the place. So
number 5, there's 2 movies I am flip-flopping between, and they are both Netflix. One is probably a more safer one with Rustin. Ma Rainey, I think, got into adapted. Oh, Ma Rainey missed adapted. Okay, well, that's one of the reasons why I do have Rustin missing, because I have Rustin at my number 6, just because I don't really know what to do with this movie. It feels like it should be a player, but also everyone is just down on this movie, and if everyone is down, there's not another person out there I can see that's high on this movie. Why should I be the only one putting at my number 10 slot for picture, my number 5 for screenplay, and number 5 in some other smaller categories? So I'm going with their international pick this year, Pablo Larraín. He gets into screenplay, which I don't think he has so far, because Jackie missed as well, right?
Jackie missed, yeah.
So this would be his first screenplay nomination for El Conde. I don't really know what else to do, because the rest of this list doesn't look very appetizing. We have Maestro, which I don't know is original or adapted, but going to the Wikipedia page, there's no based on tab, so I'm just going to put this in original, but also, if I don't have this doing well in picture, then I shouldn't really have it high up in screenplay. Saltburn's here, but I think Air would be the bigger push. I also think that maybe Amazon pushes this to next year, but there's no real basis to that. Add Elemental here, which could break in. It does have that closing night slot at Cannes, but also, when is the last time an anime movie that was not directed by Pete Docter get into a screenplay category? That's basically my screenplay lineup. Do I feel great about it? No. I feel really good about the top 4. It's just that 5 through 9 range. There's some variance there, but as I mentioned before, this is the time when movies that you don't know about just jump out of nowhere. And there could be some very small indie type movie that just comes out of nowhere from the fall festivals, jumps into this category, and steals at number 5, and it could even go higher to number 4, number 3.
Like you said, this is an exceptionally weak screenplay lineup at this moment. It's the top 4 is very strong, but below that, it's just a shit show.
That's why I'm really surprised when I see people out there say, "Oh yeah, Air has no shot to get in screenplay." It's like, well, what do you have replacing it? Like, I get if you're high on Maestro, so you have Maestro and maybe Saltburn, but at the same time, you have to at least admit Air's number 6 or 7. And it's not like Air's outside the top 10 like I feel like a lot of people are pushing that narrative.
Those are our predictions. Let us know what yours are. Let us know if you disagree. Am I a big dummy stupid head for putting The Zone of Interest at number 2? We'll see in about 1 month's time when it premieres the Cannes Film Festival. But until next time, my name is Matt.
My name is Dyl, and this is Fantasy Filmball.